So for those of you who didn't watch my 20k video, you would know that I actually used to review movies. And I used to do this on a previous channel, but somebody in the comment section said that I should bring this back under a new name, and I genuinely considered it for a while. But I didn't see the point in uploading to a new channel only a couple of times a month when a new film came out. So a new thought crossed my mind: how can I combine TommyCFlix and talk about the LEGO side, but also talk about the film side, and really merge the two into a brand new product? And thus this series is born. This series is called TommyCFlix, a series where I go through and I talk about the film and if I enjoyed it or not, and then see how LEGO did and compare some of their sets to the source material that we saw on screen. Obviously this episode is about Eternals, the quote-unquote #1 movie in the world right now, and just to warn you, in these episodes, anything that you see TommyCFlix in the thumbnail for will have spoilers, so watch out. So don't worry, these videos will always be extra on top of my normal 2 videos a week, and they will only appear when new films come out, so things like Ghostbusters and Far From Home are next on the list. But without further ado, let's jump in. So, Eternals. Currently on its trailer, it's saying it's the #1 film in the world right now, and technically they're not wrong. Eternals is currently #1, as of the point of this video, on the global box office charts, currently beating things like Venom, Dune, and No Time to Die. But managing to see this film on November the 6th, and not really caring for the numbers that it's bringing in, more about the movie experience I had during this film, I want to say that in terms of a film itself, it's not great, if I'm totally honest. The movie experience overall was an okay one, but it kinda lacked the fun that I expected out of a Marvel film, which kinda made this film not feel very Marvel-like. Yeah, it still had a nice blend between serious and comedic timing, but some of the jokes definitely felt forced, and if I'm honest, I hated the pacing throughout this film. I think the biggest issue that this film runs into is the fact that there are 10 Eternals. And yes, the film does focus on one, which I very much liked. You still had to get used to these 10 other characters which we didn't know previously, meaning that each one introduced got their own little backstory, and then later throughout the film they also had people that were significant in their lives and we had to get used to them as well, and it felt like too many characters all bombarding us at once. Like I say, thankfully the film does focus on Cersei, the main protagonist throughout this film, but unfortunately instead of getting to know her backstory straight away, we're presented with this almost Star Wars-esque opening with the rolling text at the beginning, except it's done in an incredibly boring font, and if I'm honest, all it did was explain exactly what we saw in the opening moments of the film. So it's actually kind of pointless being there. The only thing we don't really see in the opening scene that the text does explain is the fact that they were created by the Celestials, which Arishem does explain to Cersei after Ajak makes her the quote-unquote leader of the Eternals, basically explaining that the Eternals are just artificial machines used to keep intelligent life on a planet so a Celestial can be born as they are put into the center of planets so they have enough energy to grow, using intelligent life to help them grow throughout their cycle. Them being born obviously destroys the Earth, and that's what's known as the emergence, which is what we see throughout the film. Which I must say, in this specific scene where Cersei talks to Arishem, there is some of the most ambitious CGI I've ever seen Marvel produce, with an entire iRobot line trying to replicate human skin, which doesn't particularly work very well and falls heavily into the uncanny valley. But other than this explaining scene, the Celestials don't really do much throughout this film, and I know they're integral to the story of Eternals, but most of the cool stuff that they do throughout this film are clearly for the trailers. That being said, I'm glad that LEGO definitely did take on the challenge of making a Celestial as one of their sets. From what I can see on screen, the proportions look to be fairly accurate, although the model is extremely undersized. But I also understand that LEGO are going to be working to a price, and you can't exactly make a 5-foot tall Celestial that's just in scale with your minifigures. Although I don't own this set just yet, I do plan on picking it up, and if I'm totally honest, it's probably my favourite looking LEGO set out of the entire Eternals wave. The only thing I don't really understand is what's going on with his feet, like those big giant discs. I don't know if this was a concept art thing, but you can't really see his feet throughout most of this film, and I think they intentionally cover it up with some cloud or particle effects, so maybe these are just meant to either represent galaxies or stars flying by or some form of cloud, but if I'm honest, I would have preferred some sort of mech foot solution. But I think LEGO did well with this one, even though I would have loved to see some nano figures included just to show off his monumental size. But back to the film, we basically learned that these Eternals were sent to the planet to defeat the things called the Deviants, which we later found out the Celestials made as well, but you know, we'll gloss over that part for now. The Celestials also said that the Eternals were not to interfere in any human development event, hence the reason they didn't help out with Thanos unless the Deviants were involved. This fills a massively atrocious plot hole of where the hell they've all been this entire time. And if I'm honest, I actually liked this aspect of the story, being able to be self-contained into its own story and not get too many other Avengers involved, considering they are brought up throughout this film. But speaking of Avengers, this film would really have benefited from including these characters in other source material before this one. Being able to get to know a few of these characters' names and backstories a little bit more before this film would have greatly helped with the pacing of this film, as they would have already been established characters within the MCU. Yeah, I said it was nice that it was a self-contained film, but at the same time it did suffer with a lot of pacing issues, jumping from forward in time to back in time to present day, all within the first hour of the film. This felt very jarring as the viewer, because sometimes they didn't even flash the text up on the screen to tell you that it was the present day or back in time. I remember a good example is when Icarus, Cersei and Zesty Drink were meant to be going to find Gilgamesh and Thena, and the film portrays it as a chronological event, but then proceeds to pull the rug out from under us, and actually this is back in time. I remember this throwing me off the first time I saw it, and I was sure to watch out for it, because if you missed that little tiny text in the bottom corner saying that it was back in time, you're going to be confused. But the film does do this quite a bit, and this is where I say that the pacing issues do come in. But minus getting to know all of these new characters that we have in the MCU, and the pacing issues that I've said before, I think the thing I like the least about this film is actually the antagonists. The deviants in this film are just not good characters. There's one decent deviant, and the only reason he's a decent deviant is because he actually gets some character development, and then they proceed to throw that all out the window when he dies. And he just decides to show up whenever the hell he wants to. He first fights Cersei and Jon Snow at the beginning of the film, and as an audience we find out that he has some sort of healing power, which is unexplained at this current time, but it's because he's killed one of the Eternals. Why is this deviant special? Why is this deviant able to absorb powers of the Eternals? We never find out. Why does he evolve from a four-legged creature to a two-legged creature with four eyes as he sucks out the Eternal's powers? Well, we do get one very vague line about evolution from the great almighty judge Arishem, but I don't know if I'm meant to know something from the comics that I just don't know whilst watching this film. But if I'm honest, I think the worst part about this was Icarus. His backstab, if you want to even call it that, was completely predictable, and not to mention the literal backstab by Zesty Drink. And if I'm honest, Zesty Drink's backstab was actually more surprising than Icarus's turn. It almost makes me think that the big bad was just killed off for the next big thing, and he was really only there to be the antagonist in the trailers, so we didn't have any sus on Icarus, when if I'm honest, I was sus on him the whole time. Obviously this film had great acting and great special effects, but if I'm honest, I think Marvel's been doing this for so long now that I think that's fairly standard when going into one of these things. But if I'm honest, some of the actor choices that they made in this film were very surprising, and honestly quite a nice breath of fresh air from some of the older Marvel characters that we've seen throughout the films. And I very much appreciated that this film had a very diverse cast, and made some very intentional choices for its characters in this film without forcing it down my throat. I must say that Brian Henry did a great job playing a gay character throughout this film, and Lauren Ridloff, best known for her Walking Dead stuff, is actually deaf, so her character is as well. And using mostly sign language throughout this film really did integrate into the story very well, and appreciate that this is diverse casting done well, unlike some other films, which I'm sure we'll talk about in the future. But this really did help me sympathise with the characters a little bit more, even though it was difficult to get to know them all because there was 10 of them, so much that it did make me want some of the minifigures from this film. It's just a shame that they're split across so many sets in the series, with Icarus appearing in 3 of them, meaning I'm going to get duplicates, which is just a silly idea in my opinion. Considering all of these sets are reasonably priced, it would have been beneficial to include different figures in different sets, to cause less duplicates being bought across the wave. Come on, there are a few more characters in this film that you could definitely put in, such as Jon Snow or Kingo's cameraman. Different figures being available in different sets just encourages you to buy all of the sets, and would also make certain figures more desirable, such as including some more of them in the Domo ship, meaning we only need to get one set to get most of the figures, and then including other figures and other side characters in some of the smaller sets. But I think LEGO did well in terms of getting all of these Eternal sets to look like the things from the movie, and unfortunately not owning any of these sets can't really give you a full rundown of them, but think they're accurate enough to the film that if you like the film, would definitely be worth buying. But with new MCU movies, if I'm honest, I'm now looking towards good story elements, good character development, what this might do for other MCU films in the future, and an overall character arc that's going to be satisfying at the end of the day. And if I'm honest, this film does do most of those things, even if the ending is unsatisfying towards myself. Seriously, I don't know why Arishem didn't turn up whilst they were turning the Celestial into marble and was like, what are you guys doing? I'ma just crack the planet in half anyway. He had to wait 2 weeks to be the judge of this. Well, I mean, I do know why. It's because because the film would end, the MCU would end, and we wouldn't get cool things like Black Knight and Blade, which are shown in the end credit scenes. But if I'm honest, I really don't understand why he didn't just show up and stop them all, considering they're just artificial machines. But considering that the Celestial in the middle of the Earth also connected to the Unibrain, helping Cersei turn it to marble thoroughly confused me and had Ms. Bricks asking me about it, and I didn't really get it either. But hey, maybe I'll get it in a second viewing. Or in a future film, as 3 of the Eternals were only taken for judgment, as 3 of them are still roaming the stars, meeting up with One Direction. But the Eternal wave has been out for a fair while now, and if I'm honest, I'd love to see LEGO go back and remake some of these sets in the future, maybe giving us a bust of Arishem to make him more size accurate. And actually, if I'm honest, I'm glad that LEGO are going back and doing some of these Marvel sets again, like the Hulkbuster from Infinity War. Strange we heard about that the other day, and now I'm bringing it up here. You should click the screen to find out what I got to say about it. Click the screen, I'll see you in the next one.